one of the reasons why my videos, I haven't been doing videos, is we've had a lot of loss in the family. Most recently, my Uncle Ed passed away, and he was one of a kind. He was a great guy. He was my friend, my best friend, I should say. And he supported me in many, many different ways. He was always around here in the shop with me. We were always doing stuff, going out wheeling together, going to the King of the Hammers. Lots of great memories. For those of you guys that are watching this, I hope that you guys have somebody in your life like that, an uncle, best friend, whoever it might be. We had a relationship that was one of a kind, but without getting too sappy, this was his welding helmet, and I just found some new lenses, so I just cleaned it all up, put new lenses in it, and I'm going to make this my dedicated TIG welding helmet. Anyway, from here on out, these videos are going to be dedicated to Uncle Ed in his memory. He was one of a kind, and we all miss him. Well, good morning. It's been months, and I want to get back on this thing. I've had a lot of things going on, but we're back in the shop. See if I can get some continuity and get some consistency working on this thing. Since the last time you saw this thing, I've done a few things. One new addition is this front truss. I wanted to get the link geometry sort of solidified so I could flex out the suspension and make sure the shocks were happy. And then mainly after that, mock up the front drive shaft, make sure the front drive shaft and mid drive shaft were happy. I kind of have this in place. I'm gonna need to take this mid shaft out and cut it down a little more so I can get the carrier bearing back where I want it, because I want to make sure that the front U-joint on the mid bearing or the carrier bearing and rear U-joint on the front drive shaft is pivoting at about the same place. I don't know if you can see that. At about the same place the lower link is pivoting. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. I'm going to take this mid shaft out, and keep in mind everything's just mocked up. The drive shaft's just tacked together. The mid shaft, the yokes on the mid shaft are just pressed in there. They're not welded. After that, I'm going to trim this mid shaft and see how it looks. Still might need to put a double cardan joint in this mid shaft, but I'm doing this just to get everything in place where I want it, and then talk to the driveline guy and consult him and see if this is going to work as is, or if I need a cardan joint, because it's going, not only is it going outboard toward the frame rail this way or that way, it's going down because the transfer case is clocked as low as I can put it, and that mid bearing's got to be there because it's got to clear the headers, which I took this header off so I could work on the mid bearing or the carrier bearing. So anyway, that's what I'm doing this morning. After I get that in place where I want it, we'll put it on the lift and flex it out and see what it does. Then I want to flex out the rear suspension and measure for a rear drive shaft, and get those measurements over to the driveline guy and have him build me something. And then after that, if we have time, I'm gonna work on building a oil pan skid for the engine. So Anyway, here we go. All right, had to cut a little strip, 1/2 inch, and extend this front mount for the carrier bearing. So got that all welded up. Now I'm gonna wait for it to cool and I'll stick it on the carrier bearing and get it tacked in. All right, so we got the carrier bearing tacked in. Shorten up the mid shaft. You saw I had to TIG weld the carrier bearing collars, the nuts on the collars to get to the bottom nut. I've got the carrier bearing U-joints at the same angle as the output on the transfer case. Everything rolls real smooth. I'm still going to talk to the driveline guy and see if there's a possibility I need a double cardan joint here. I just don't want any vibrations if I can help it. So now we got the buggy rolled forward and I'm going to put it up on the lift, droop out this front drive shaft, droop out the suspension, check the front drive shaft, make sure everything's happy. If it is, then I'll finish tacking in the carrier bearing. I've only got the back plate tacked right now. I'll tack in the front and get to work on a oil pan skid. All right, here we go.
Next morning.
Okay, we got 2 new faces in the shop. That's Sarah, that's Maggie. They showed up on the front lawn about a month ago. Nobody claimed them. I think they were working dogs, and I think somebody just dumped them out here. It's been happening a lot out in this area where we live. Anyway, so for the purposes of continuity, kinda, not really, I've been working on this mid shaft, and right now it's all torn out. Carrier bearing sort of torn out. And what I've been running into is if I match the angles on the U-joint yokes, U-joint caps for the output on the transfer case and the input side on the carrier bearing, which ends up being the front end of the carrier bearing kind of pointing upward like that. Picture tip of my finger being the inboard side of the carrier bearing, and then where my watch is or my wrist being the output of the carrier bearing. If I match the angles here and make this drive line, the mid drive line, happy, and make the U-joints or the yokes parallel, it tips the front end of the carrier bearing or the output of the carrier bearing upward. And when I droop out the suspension, this front drive line angle is not happy. I bottom out and bind this U-joint. So what I think I'm gonna have to do after fighting this thing and messing with it and taking it out, putting it back in, taking it out, putting it back in, is I'm gonna have to point, well, at the very least, I'm gonna have to lower the carrier bearing down closer to the chassis cross member. And then I'm probably going to have to point the output downward so that I get as much angle or travel out of this front suspension and front driveline. Get as much travel or angle out of it as possible. You know, I fought for quite a while to put these 16-inch shocks in. I want to take advantage of all the travel the 16-inch shocks have to offer with the high pinion. I need to make sure those U-joints are happy and the drive shaft doesn't bind. And this is why I did this. You know, it's a whole bunch of trial and error, a whole bunch of tacking, breaking the tacks, repositioning, tacking again, moving things around, taking it out, putting it back in. And it's tedious and it's frustrating because you feel like you're not really getting anything done. But I know that if I leave it the way it is and I don't get that extra inch of travel out of the front end, nobody else will know it, but I'll know it, and it'll just bug the shit out of me. So that's what's going on with this. I kind of got fed up with this and just put it down for a while and started working on design for the oil pan skid. And I ran into another problem. I really kind of screwed myself by putting these lower links inboard as much as I did, because it really pinched off any kind of a mount surface on this front cross member, which everything's being blocked by the drivetrain, the mock-up engine and transmission. You can't really tell. But anyway, the thing is if I didn't move the frame side lower link mount inboard, it would have interfered with the drive line at full droop. So trying to package everything is just a challenge, and I really enjoy it, but there's all these cause and effects that happen when you do stuff. You know, I think I've learned that's why most people only run 14-inch travel shocks on the front end. I've learned why there's some chassis that don't do a high pinion, they only do a low pinion, just because of the packaging. A high pinion just gets in the way and collides with everything and suspension. I've also learned that maybe this engine probably didn't need to be as low in the chassis as I put it, and I may still change that. I don't know. We'll see what happens with this engine oil pan skid. But right now, I've got these brackets. You can see the front face of one bracket and then the front face of the other bracket right there. What I'm going to do is use 2 bolt tube flanges and attach 1.5-inch tubing to those. It's going to come straight out from there, and there'll be a loop that comes around the front of the engine in 1.5-inch tube, and then it's also going to tie in to the motor mount up here, and it's all going to be 2 bolt flanges, so it's all removable, so you can service it, service the oil, change the oil and stuff without the oil pan skid being in there. I still haven't quite figured out how I'm gonna attach these flanges at the frame side. I might do a bolt-on system, or I might do a weld-on system. I'm not real sure. I do know that the oil pan, the way it is not going to work on the driver's side. Here's the oil pan. I took it out because this drain plug on the sump is in the way of the tubes that are going to be running this way. The tubes are really close to the edge of this sump, so I'm going to have to modify that and pull that drain plug out and maybe put it up here. I don't know. There's another drain plug in the back of the pan, and so that might just have to suffice too. We'll have to see, but that'll probably be the first order of business this morning, is taking that drain plug off and welding that up. This is a steel oil pan, and I bought it simply because I knew I may have to modify something. If you're still watching this video after all my rambling, hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. If not, hopefully the video will suffice in photos. All right, so here we go. All right, so I cut that drain plug, boss. All it was a bolt that was, there was a hole drilled through and then a bolt welded on the sump itself. So I cut that off, got it all cleaned up, and then I made me a little patch plate to go over the side, and then that'll give me some weld surface. This is only 16 gauge. I think it'll work just fine. Little worried about welding 16 gauge. I haven't really welded or TIG welded anything that thin yet, so that'll be interesting, but I think it'll work out just fine. All right, here we go. Well, shit. I'm gonna work out his plan. I blew right through the freaking oil pan. I don't know what thickness this is down here, but it ain't that thick, that's for sure. I didn't grind that much material off of it. All right, well, there's my patch, and good thing I'm not a body worker. This it occurred to me after the fact I probably should have done an inset patch so everything was flush, but yeah, it doesn't really matter in this case. Right here, where this big old blob is, that was where I first lit up on the patch to do a tack weld, and I blew right through it. Like, it was super thin right there. I don't know why. Maybe it was right at the edge of the hole that was drilled for the bolt. I have no idea. But anyway, so I went back over here and tack welded, and then I tack welded over here, and then I tack welded down here, and then I came back over here and filled in that hole, and that's where that big blob is there for a bunch of reinforcement. But I'm gonna let this cool off, and then I'm gonna go back over it one more time and just clean everything up. Maybe add a little bit more filler to it just for insurance. And then we'll move on. All right, here we go. Okay, well, she ain't pretty, but it appears my patch job is leak proof. Got the sump filled up with water, and she ain't leaking, so good to go there. All right, so I got the drive line out of the way. Oil pan bolted back up, and I've moved it over. I moved the buggy over to where I can put it up on the lift. And so this is what I'm kind of thinking. If you can see, here's the link mount, and this top piece I fabricated here goes over the link mount tabs as a gusset. There's a break in the front of it with a tab that goes down, and I'm going to mount the 1.25 or 1.5 tubing off the front of that. There'll be a 2-bolt flange here somewhere, either on the side of the oil pan or up where the sump starts. And then there'll be tubes coming upward here to the engine mount, which is like right there. Well, right there. The engine mount's right above the camera right here. And then it'll come out toward the front of the sump all the way up here with it'll kind of turn up a little bit with a 180-degree bend. So what I need to do now is lift the whole buggy up and put it on a flat surface. I have that little portable welding table with the rollers or the casters on it. So I'll get this cart out of here, put it up on that, and I'm gonna have to probably support the axles with jack stands, because The welding cart's pretty high, and that'll droop the shocks out. And I don't want to take all this apart. I probably should. It'd be a lot easier if I took all this apart so I have access to everything, but it'll take me quite a while to take the axle out and the shocks and everything. So I'm gonna see if I can just put it up on the welding cart with everything intact. Plus it gives me a better idea of the room I have anyway. So, all right, here we go. All right, so what I've done is I've hung a wrench off a nut on the inside of the link mount bracket because I need enough clearance to get a wrench in there to tighten down that that bolt. Hindsight being 2020, I should have welded a capture washer, a nut capture washer on this side of the link mount. Had I known I'd be doing all this. And the reason I've hung this on here is because I need to make sure when I weld this gusset on, I have enough clearance to get that wrench in and out of there, because this front face is going to be up against where that wrench would slide in for the nut. And yeah, I could still get in there with the open inside probably, but I just want to make sure I have enough clearance or plenty of clearance. Yeah, other than the other idea I had was to just go ahead and make a normal gusset here without this front face, and then somehow run bolts through the top of the gusset for the tube bracket that's coming off of here for the skid plate. But that would make things even more complicated, and this is already complicated enough. So anyway.